Welcome back to another video, guys. It's Megan. I forgot to introduce myself before I even said welcome back, but we're back in my home library today because it's spring break, and I thought what better time to film a DNF video about the books I DNF'd in the first quarter of the year. I decided that it would be better to maybe do like quarterly DNF videos instead of including them in my monthly wrap-ups, just so that they're all in one spot. I don't know. This sounds like a fun thing to do, but I did DNF, well, I DNF a lot of books, FYI, a lot, and I've come to realize that that is not a bad thing. I used to not DNF books and I'd power through, but I even have a video, I'll link it down below, about reasons, like signs that you know you should DNF a book. So I DNF'd 9 books in the first 3 months of the year, most of them in January. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 5? 5 in January, 3 in February, and only 1 in March. I'm getting apparently better at knowing my taste. It's amazing how I still don't know my taste and I'm still DNFing books, but I DNF'd 7 fantasy books, 2 sci-fi books. 6 were adult, 3 were young adult, and I read anywhere between only 4% of the books to all the way up to 65% of the book before I DNF'd it. And I did read 4,037 pages in DNFs, and I'm like, that's a lot. 4,000 pages in books that I didn't really care about or want to read. It's just sad. I've already talked about some of these, so I won't go on at length about each one because I have another video from the beginning of the year where I mentioned these. But the first book I DNF'd at the beginning of the year was The Wolf by Leo Carew. And I only decided to read this because Leanna from Leanna's Library, love her channel, but I'm starting to question her taste in books. It was one of her favorite books of all time, but I think she's an anthropologist, or she majored in anthropology, or she just knows a lot about anthropology or something, and that's why she likes this book, because I did not find anything interesting in here. I couldn't connect to the characters, the plot. I read 10%. I mean, because it was kind of a long book, but maybe it was because I was reading the audio, and I don't know, but it was not for me. Then I tried reading another booktuber's favorite book, which was The Lies of Locke Lamora by Scott Lynch, because a lot of booktubers have this as one of their favorites, including Murphy Napier. I thought, okay, I like Murphy's taste somewhat, I feel like, so let me try one of her favorites. Couldn't get into it, and I hear that the second book doesn't get any better. It's a trilogy. Maybe if it were just one book, more would be happening. It's supposed to be like Pirates of the Caribbean, but like a heist, you know. I thought that would be like super exciting, like adventurous. It was so boring. How could an adventure book be this boring? I don't know. Then my 4% DNF. I DNF'd this book at 4%, not because I didn't think it was good, but because I just realized this was not the right time for me to be reading it, and that is Babel by R.F. Kuang. I'd read her other series, you know, The Poppy War, there we go. I read like 1.5 books in that series before I DNF'd it. Liked the first book, at least the first half of it, and I liked her style. She's obviously a really good writer. She's very young, surprisingly. She's like in her 20s, I think. So I thought, okay, I'll give this other one a try. I would like it if it was more fantasy, but apparently it's just got so much other commentary going on about stuff in the real world and history that's the part I don't care about as much. It kind of reminded me of Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell, just in the premise of it, but then it says it's supposed to be sort of like The Secret History by Donna Tartt, but Leanna from Leanna's Library says that it's not, and that's like a crime to compare it to that book. So it just wasn't the right time for me. It's very like, I don't know, reminds me of like Charles Dickens writing style, and I don't think I was in the mood for that at that time, but this is one I might actually try again. Then I DNF'd and may never read from this author again. Well, I might give her one more shot. I DNF'd The City We Became by N.K. Jemisin. I read this one up to 55% of the book, so I gave it over halfway before I was like, I can't do it anymore. It's so weird. Her books are really, really weird. I read her, you know, of Obelisk Gate, Stone Sky, you know, whatever that series is called. What's the name of the first book? The Fifth Season, there we go. And I liked The Fifth Season, but I didn't like the other 2 books. But boy, this one was even weirder than those. I still want to read her Inheritance trilogy, like 100,000 Kingdoms or whatever. I want to try that one. I'm going to give her one more shot. But honestly, her books are just like, the writing style and how weird they are, they're just not for me. Oh, but maybe if I was from New York, I would like this book better because it is basically a love letter to New York City. Then I DNF'd a book that the public librarian had come to my school to talk about. And, well, like one of the books she talked about. It's called Belladonna by Adeline Grace. It's a young adult fantasy novel that I read 32% of, and she had compared it to the show Lucifer, but if they like went on a murder mystery thing together, like the main character and the Lucifer type character. So I love that show. I watched, you know, every season of it, and this was not that. I don't know what this was, but it was so boring. I didn't get to that exciting part, I guess, yet, and where I just didn't care about the characters, and that's all it was really doing right now, was introducing the characters. I was like, no, this book is just, it's blah. Maybe young adult is just not really for me anymore. Okay, then I DNF'd a book that is also fantasy. It's also young adult, but the librarian at the other high school in my district decided to do it for our big like Read-a-Palooza event that we have every year at our school. And I was trying to decide what my fantasy choice was going to be for Read-a-Palooza, which is kind of like a little one-time book club. And I couldn't decide. So I asked the other librarian, and she said she was doing Hotel Magnifique by Emily Taylor. There we go. And I was like, ooh, well, let me read it first before I choose to do it. Because she went ahead and bought like, 8 copies of the book. I don't know if she'd read it or not. And the cover was so pretty. I just love the colors on the cover. I thought they go well together. So I read 53%, of this book. Couldn't do it. Couldn't do it. So boring, bored out of my mind, didn't care about anything going on. It's a silly little YA book. Didn't care. It was so bad. So instead of doing this, when I think a lot of the people that read fantasy at our school would not really be interested in this as much, especially it really only appeals to girls, then instead I decided to do A Wizard's Guide to Defensive Baking by T. Kingfisher. So it's like funny and lighthearted, something the kids have probably never read or heard about. It's very similar kind of in vibes to Shrek. I don't know why I'm talking about that book instead of this one, but that's the one I chose, and I've got a lot of people. It's like one of our most popular ones for Read-a-Palooza. So I was really excited I picked a different book, but I did go ahead and order like 1 copy of this one for our school library. Next, I DNF'd the only book I have a physical copy of, All Systems Red by Martha Wells. How could I DNF a novella, you might say? It's so short. Why didn't I just read it? Because I didn't like it at all. I've never read anything by Martha Wells before. I don't know that I ever will again. Has she written anything else? I don't think I've ever heard of any of the rest of these. But I've read this because I hear so much good about it. But then I also hear some bad things too. It's the Murder Bot series about this robot type AI creature thing that basically is supposed to be a murder bot, but just wants to be left alone to figure out who he is and like watch soap operas. So it was supposed to be funny. I was not laughing. I was not entertained. And I think I just don't like sci-fi, because every sci-fi book I've tried recently, I've DNF'd it. I don't know. I guess sci-fi is just not for me and I just need to give up on it. Next, okay, so there's 2 left. Next, I DNF'd a book that I read 65% of, and it was a big book. Well, no, it wasn't. It was 287 pages. It felt big, which is Nice Dragons Finish Last by Rachel Aaron. And I don't even know where I heard about this book. Somewhere like online. I was reading the ebook, I want to say. No, I was listening to the audiobook. But this book was sort of like, I mean, it was set in the real world, but also had like fantasy elements, and it's very like urban fantasy, like big city, things like that. There's sort of like an alternate version of our world where other stuff has gone on, and like that part was kind of interesting. And I know it's a series, so I thought maybe it'd get better, but I realized very quickly that it was very young adult. I don't know why at first I thought it was gonna be more adult. I didn't like the audiobook narrator, so there's probably multiple reasons, but YA fantasy, man, it is just not for me. The final book that I DNF'd is another sci-fi. Oh my gosh. And the first like chapter was so good, but then the characters kept changing because the time kept jumping around to like thousands of years later, so you couldn't get connected to any of the characters. And that is Children of Time by Adrian Tchaikovsky. And I hear such good things about this book. It's huge. It's 600 pages, and I read 29% of it. So almost 200 pages. It's the only book I DNF'd in March. I was listening to the audiobook, which maybe I know reading fantasy audiobooks is not good for me because I can't like follow along with all the names and places. So maybe it was the same with this, like a sci-fi. But the first chapter was so interesting about what happened when we first like were colonizing like other planets and stuff. And yes, there's going to be like giant it's like humans versus giant spiders, but that's not we hadn't got to that part yet. That's all I knew. But I also didn't like that they were spiders. If it was anything else, if it was anything but spiders, like, well, not anything. I don't want it to be like roaches or something either, but I just wish it were more like a mammal of some kind. Like then I could deal with it. I don't know, or just anything but just not an insect. If it just were an insect, I'd be okay with it. So in my head, I'd pretend like they were something. I think one time I pretended like they were pandas. I was like, oh, let's just pretend like it's a panda, and then I'll be okay with it. I just don't want to see these images of spiders because bugs, I just hate bugs. Anyway, didn't care about it, jumped around way too much of time. Honestly, it was really confusing. Like I didn't even know what time period we were in, how many years had passed between different things happening. I was like, oh, and then this person is like in a cryogenic sleep or something, you know, or something for like a couple thousand years, and then somebody else awakens them and finds out something going on. I don't know. I couldn't figure out what's going on. I think I'm just too stupid to read sci-fi. So those are the 4,000 pages that I DNF'd. Let me know down below if you've read any of these, if you DNF'd them as well, or maybe I'm totally wrong and I should give one of them another chance. If I give any of them another chance, it will be Babel, for sure. Maybe The Lies of Locke Lamora. That's it. Nothing else would I ever probably try reading again, or very many other books. The only other author I'm definitely going to try again is N.K. Jemisin. We'll see. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll talk to you again later. Bye.